They said she was a gold digger. They said she was lucky just to be in his presence. For 3 years, Eleanor sat in the shadows of her husband's rising empire, wearing cheap clothes and taking insults that would break a lesser person. But on the day the divorce papers were signed, silence was her only weapon. Marcus thought he was discarding a burden. He had no idea he was handing the keys to the kingdom back to its rightful owner. Because when Eleanor walked out of that law firm, she didn't get on a bus. She got into a car that Marcus couldn't even afford in his wildest dreams. This isn't just a divorce story. It's a lesson in why you never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the library. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Sterling Holloway building was cold. It was the kind of artificial cold that seeped into your bones, designed to make you uncomfortable, designed to make you want to leave. Eleanor sat on one side of the mahogany table, her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a simple, grey wool cardigan that had seen better days, and her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, practical bun. She looked small against the backdrop of the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Seattle skyline. Across from her sat Marcus. Marcus, with his tailored Italian suit, his Rolex Submariner glinting under the recessed lighting, and that look on his face, a mixture of pity and triumph. Beside him sat his lawyer, Arthur Higgins, a man who charged $600 an hour to destroy lives. "Let's just get this over with, Ellie," Marcus sighed, checking his watch. "I have a reservation at Le Monde at 7. Jessica gets cranky if I'm late." He didn't even have the decency to hide it anymore. Jessica, the 23-year-old marketing intern he'd hired 6 months ago. The reason Eleanor was currently staring at a document titled Dissolution of Marriage. Arthur Higgins pushed the papers across the table with the tip of his pen, as if touching them with his fingers might contaminate him. "As discussed, Mrs. Vance," Higgins said, his voice oily. "You receive the 2018 Honda Civic, the contents of your personal savings account, which currently stands at $412, and a one-time settlement of $5,000 to assist with your transition." Marcus leaned forward, flashing that charming smile that had once made Eleanor's heart flutter. "I'm being generous, Ellie. The prenup was ironclad. You get nothing. But I'm giving you $5,000. That's enough for a deposit on a studio apartment in the suburbs. Maybe you can get your old job back at the diner." Eleanor didn't speak. She hadn't spoken a single word since entering the room. "Silence implies consent," Higgins muttered, uncapping a heavy fountain pen. "Sign on the marked lines." Eleanor reached out. Her hand didn't shake. There were no tears in her green eyes. She picked up the cheap ballpoint pen provided for her, ignoring Higgins's expensive fountain pen. Scritch, scratch. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. She signed her name. Eleanor Vance. Then she paused. She looked up at Marcus one last time. "What?" Marcus snapped, unnerved by her stare. It wasn't the look of a broken woman. It was the look of someone watching a child play with matches near a gas tank. "Don't look at me like that. You did this to yourself. You were just boring, Ellie. You stopped trying. Look at you." He gestured vaguely at her grey cardigan. "You don't fit in my world anymore. My company is about to go public. I need a wife who looks the part. Not a mouse." Eleanor slowly placed the pen down. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her wedding ring. A modest, thin gold band with a tiny diamond chip. She placed it on the mahogany table. It made a soft clink. "Keep the $5,000, Marcus laughed, mistaking her gesture for defeat. "Buy yourself some new clothes. Seriously." Eleanor stood up. She picked up her worn leather satchel. She turned to the door. "Not even a goodbye?" Marcus called out after her, his voice mocking. "Come on, Ellie. Say something. Beg? Scream? Cry?" She stopped with her hand on the door handle. She turned her head slightly, her profile sharp and elegant against the grey light of the window. She smiled. It wasn't a sad smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives before the pounce. Then she opened the door and walked out, leaving the silence to suffocate them. "Weirdo," Marcus muttered, shaking his head. "Well, Arthur, that's done. Let's get a drink. I'm a free man." He had no idea just how expensive his freedom was about to be. The elevator ride down to the lobby was swift. Eleanor watched the numbers descend. 40, 30, 20. With every floor that passed, the slump in her shoulders vanished. Her posture straightened. The look of submissiveness she had worn for 3 years evaporated like mist. When the doors opened to the lobby, the security guard, old Mr. Henderson, nodded at her. "Rough day, Mrs. Vance?" Eleanor stopped. "It's Miss Sterling now, Mr. Henderson. Actually, just Eleanor is fine for today." "Right. Take care now. It's pouring out there." Eleanor pushed through the revolving doors and stepped onto the sidewalk. The Seattle rain was coming down in sheets, cold and unforgiving. People were rushing by with umbrellas, heads ducked low. Behind her, the revolving doors spun again. Marcus and Arthur Higgins stepped out, laughing. Marcus popped open a large black umbrella, sheltering himself and his lawyer, oblivious to Eleanor standing 5 feet away in the downpour. "My driver is bringing the Porsche around," Marcus said loudly, ensuring Eleanor could hear. "I'll drop you at the club, Arthur." He glanced at Eleanor, who was getting soaked. "Hey, do you need bus fare?" "I think I have some change." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a few quarters and tossing them toward her. They clattered on the wet pavement near her worn-out sneakers. "Pathetic," Arthur sneered. Just then the traffic on the busy street seemed to part. A low, deep hum vibrated through the ground, distinct from the noise of the taxis and buses. Turning the corner was a car that didn't belong on a casual Tuesday afternoon. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom extended wheelbase. Midnight blue, bordering on black. The chrome grille gleamed even in the grey weather, aggressive and regal. It moved with the silent grace of a shark gliding through water. Marcus paused, his keys to the Porsche dangling in his hand. "Whoa," he whistled. "Look at that beast. That's the custom V12 model. $500,000. Easy. Wonder who's in town. Maybe the CEO of Amazon?" The massive vehicle slowed down. It didn't pull up to the hotel entrance across the street. It didn't pull up to the bank. It pulled up directly in front of Eleanor. Marcus laughed. "Looks like you're blocking the VIP's spot, Ellie. Move before security comes out." Eleanor didn't move. The rear door of the Rolls-Royce didn't open immediately. Instead, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a uniform that cost more than Marcus's entire suit, and holding a large black umbrella with a silver handle. It was Sebastian, the head of security for the Sterling family for over 30 years. Sebastian walked around the car, his movements crisp and professional. He ignored Marcus. He ignored the lawyer. He walked straight to Eleanor. He snapped the umbrella open and held it over her head, shielding her instantly from the rain. Then he bowed. It wasn't a mocking bow. It was a bow of deep, genuine respect. "Good afternoon, madame," Sebastian said, his voice cutting through the noise of the street. Your father sends his regards. He was worried you might be cold. Marcus dropped his umbrella. It tumbled onto the wet sidewalk. What the? Eleanor looked at Sebastian. Thank you, Sebastian. Is everything ready? The jet is fueled and waiting at King County Airport, madam. The board of directors meeting in Zurich is at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. We have your wardrobe prepared on the plane. Good. Sebastian opened the rear door. The interior was cream leather and walnut wood. The soft glow of ambient lighting spilled out into the rainy street. Eleanor turned to Marcus one last time. He was standing there, mouth agape, rain soaking his expensive Italian suit, the quarters he had thrown at her shining on the ground between them. You, Marcus stammered. Who? What is this? Eleanor looked at the quarters. Then she looked at Marcus. You dropped your change, Marcus, she said, her voice calm, commanding, and utterly devoid of the warmth she used to give him. You're going to need it. She slid into the back seat. Sebastian closed the door with a solid, heavy thud that sounded like a vault locking. As the car pulled away, splashing water onto Marcus's shoes, he saw the license plate for the first time. It didn't have a number. It just had a family crest. A crest he recognized from the business news, from the top of the Forbes list, from the global conglomerate he had been trying to get a contract with for 5 years. The Sterling crest. Sterling? Arthur Higgins whispered, his face draining of color. Marcus, was her maiden name Vance? Marcus stared at the tail lights disappearing into the mist. His hands were shaking. No, he whispered, a sick feeling rising in his stomach. She told me her name was Ellie S. I thought the S stood for Smith. She said she was a barista when we met. You idiot, Arthur hissed, stepping away from him. That wasn't a barista. That was Eleanor Sterling, the sole heiress to the Sterling Global Group, the company I just pitched my entire life's work to, Marcus choked out. The company, Arthur confirmed, that just acquired the bank holding your business loans. Marcus fell to his knees in the rain, the water soaking through his trousers, as the realization hit him like a freight train. He hadn't just divorced his wife. He had just declared war on God. The Gulfstream G650ER climbed through the cloud layer, breaking into the brilliant, blinding gold of the sunset above. Inside the cabin, the silence was absolute, save for the soft clinking of crystal. Eleanor stood in front of the full-length mirror in the private stateroom at the back of the jet. The grey wool cardigan, the costume of Ellie the housewife, lay in a crumpled heap on the floor. She looked at her reflection. The woman staring back was tired. Yes. There were fine lines of stress around her eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago. But the fire was back. She reached for the garment bag Sebastian had hung for her. She unzipped it, the sound sharp and decisive. Inside was a structured blazer from Alexander McQueen, tailored to within a millimeter of her life, and a pair of trousers that cost more than Marcus's car. She dressed slowly, reclaiming her armor. When she stepped out into the main cabin, the transformation was complete. The mouse was dead. The Empress had returned. Sebastian was waiting for her, standing by a low table set with a bottle of Dom Perignon, the 2008 vintage, her favorite, and a sleek silver laptop. You look like yourself again, madam, Sebastian said, a hint of a smile touching his lips as he poured the champagne. I feel like I've been in a coma for 3 years, Sebastian, Eleanor said, taking the flute. She took a sip, the crisp bubbles washing away the taste of the stale coffee from the lawyer's office. What is the status of the Vance portfolio? Sebastian tapped a key on the laptop, and a graph projected onto the cabin wall screen. "Marcus Vance," Sebastian began, his tone professional. "CEO of Vance Tech. His company is currently leveraged to the hilt. He took out 3 massive loans to fund the development of his new AI software, Vance AI. He put up everything as collateral: his penthouse, his car, his future stock options, and even his parents' vacation home in Aspen." Eleanor walked over to the screen, studying the numbers. "And the lenders?" "The primary lender was Silicon Valley Bridge Bank," Sebastian explained. "However, as of 4:00 p.m. today, approximately 10 minutes after you signed the divorce papers, Sterling Global Group completed a hostile acquisition of their debt portfolio. We now own his debt, Eleanor." Eleanor ran a finger over the screen, tracing the downward slope of Marcus's liquidity. "He called me boring," she whispered, a dark amusement coloring her voice. "He said I didn't fit in his world. He didn't realize that his world is just a tiny rented room in my universe." "What are your instructions?" Sebastian asked. Eleanor sat down in the cream leather seat, crossing her legs. She looked out the window at the darkening sky. "He has a launch party for his company in 2 weeks. He thinks he's going to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange next month. He thinks he's the next Elon Musk." She turned back to Sebastian, her eyes cold. "I want to trigger the bad boy clauses in his loan agreements. Conduct a full audit of his company starting tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m. Freeze his corporate accounts for suspicious activity. And Sebastian—" "Yes, madame." "Cancel his reservation at Le Monde." Sebastian paused. "The restaurant? That seems petty, considering we are about to bankrupt him." Eleanor smiled. It was the same dangerous smile she had given Marcus in the office. "He missed our 3rd anniversary dinner to go there with Jessica. He told me he was working late. I want him to know that even the smallest comforts of his life exist only because I allow them to. Cancel it." Sebastian nodded, typing a command into his phone. "Consider it done. And regarding the other woman, Miss Jessica Miller?" "Jessica," Eleanor sighed. "The 23-year-old marketing intern who thinks Prada is high fashion." Eleanor picked up a dossier from the table. "She's not the villain, Sebastian. She's just a symptom of Marcus's ego. But she's about to learn a very hard lesson about return on investment. Let her stay. When the ship sinks, I want to see if the rats swim or drown." The jet banked left, turning toward Europe. Eleanor closed the dossier. 3 years ago, I walked away from the Sterling Empire because I wanted to be loved for me, not my billions, she said softly to the empty room. I found a man. I loved him. I cleaned his house. I cooked his meals. And he threw me away like garbage. She took another sip of champagne. Let's show him what expensive garbage looks like. The rain in Seattle hadn't let up. If anything, it was coming down harder, turning the city streets into rivers of oil-slicked asphalt. Marcus sat in the passenger seat of his Porsche 911, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. The image of Eleanor stepping into that Rolls-Royce was burned into his retinas. It played on a loop in his mind. The crest, the bow from the driver, the Sterling name. "Babe?" Jessica's voice whined from the passenger seat, cutting through his panic. "Babe, are you listening to me? I said this rain is ruining my blowout. Why didn't you get the valet?" Marcus snapped his head toward her. Jessica was scrolling through Instagram, the blue light illuminating her perfectly contoured face. She was beautiful undeniably, but looking at her now, all he could see was a liability. "Shut up, Jess," Marcus muttered. Jessica dropped her phone. "Excuse me?" You just got divorced today. You're supposed to be celebrating. You promised me dinner at Le Monde and then a shopping spree for the launch party." "I said shut up," Marcus roared, slamming his hand on the dashboard. Jessica recoiled, eyes wide. "What is your problem? Did the old hag try to take the PlayStation or something?" Marcus let out a hysterical, dry laugh. "The old hag?" "Jess, the old hag, just left in a car worth more than this entire block. My lawyer thinks she's Eleanor Sterling." "Sterling?" Jessica frowned, processing the name. "Like the bank? The hotels? The ones who sponsor Fashion Week?" "Yes," Marcus whispered. "That's Sterling." "Wait." Jessica's eyes lit up, missing the danger entirely. "That means she's rich? Like, super rich? Marcus, that's amazing. You were married to her for 3 years. Alimony. You can sue her for alimony. You can get half her stuff." Marcus stared at her. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he was dating a moron. "I signed a prenup, Jessica. I signed a waiver. I gave her $5,000 to go away because I thought she was broke. I literally paid the richest woman in the world to leave me alone." His phone buzzed. It was Arthur Higgins. Marcus snatched it up. "Arthur, tell me you found something. Tell me it was a mistake. Maybe she stole the car. Maybe she's the maid for the Sterlings." Arthur's voice on the other end was trembling. "Marcus, shut up and listen. I just ran a background check. A real one. Not the cheap one we did before the marriage. I called a contact at the DOJ. And? Eleanor Vance doesn't exist. Her social security number was an alias created by Sterling Security. Her real name is Eleanor Victoria Sterling. She is the sole heir to the Sterling fortune. Net worth estimated at $42 billion. The phone slipped from Marcus's hand and fell between the seats. 42 billion. He felt bile rise in his throat. He had made her clean the toilets. He had complained about her cooking. He had cheated on her with an intern because Eleanor didn't have ambition. "Babe, you're scaring me," Jessica said, checking her reflection in the sun visor mirror. "Whatever. Let's just go to dinner. I need a martini, a big one." Marcus took a deep breath. He had to think. He was a businessman. He was a shark. He could fix this. He just needed to calm down. "Okay, so she's rich." "So what? We're divorced. It's done. She left. She's probably going to live on a private island somewhere. I still have my company. I still have the IPO next month." He started the car. "You're right. Let's eat. I need a drink." He drove to Le Monde, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. He tossed the keys to the valet, trying to regain his swagger. He walked in, Jessica clinging to his arm, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. The maitre d', a snooty Frenchman named Jean-Luc, who usually greeted Marcus with a warm handshake, was standing behind the podium. He didn't look up. "Reservation for Vance," Marcus said, smoothing his lapel. "Table for 2. The one by the fireplace." Jean-Luc slowly raised his eyes. There was no warmth. There was only a cold, bureaucratic stare. "I am sorry, Monsieur Vance," Jean-Luc said. "We have no reservation under that name." "Check again," Marcus said, annoyed. "I make this reservation every Tuesday. Standing table." "I am aware," Jean-Luc said. "However, the reservation was cancelled 10 minutes ago by the owner of the account." "I am the owner of the account," Marcus shouted. "Actually," Jean-Luc said, looking down at his ledger, "the priority account holder for the black card on file was listed as Mrs. Eleanor Vance. She called personally. She also instructed us to inform you that your tab here is closed." permanently. People in the lobby were starting to stare. Jessica tugged on his arm. "Marcus, this is embarrassing. Fix it." "She can't do that," Marcus sputtered. "I pay the bills." "You paid with a supplementary card attached to her credit rating," Jean-Luc said, delivering the final blow with relish. "It appears, Monsieur Vance, that without her signature, your credit score is insufficient for our establishment. We have a dress code, and we also have a solvency code. Good evening." Jean-Luc signaled to two large security guards. Marcus backed away, his face burning red. He turned and stormed out, Jessica trotting behind him. "Where are we going?" Jessica whined. "I'm hungry." "We're going to the office," Marcus snapped. "I need to check the accounts. Something is wrong. If she cancelled the dinner, she might try to mess with the personal accounts." They drove in silence to the Vance Tech headquarters. It was a sleek glass building in downtown Seattle, a monument to Marcus's ego. He parked the Porsche in his reserved spot and ran up to the 42nd floor. He burst into his office, waking up his computer. He logged into his personal banking portal. Access denied. He tried again. Access denied. Account frozen by institution. "No, no, no," Marcus whispered. He logged into the corporate account. The operating capital for the launch. The millions of dollars from the loans. The screen loaded. Balance, $0. Status, awaiting audit. Frozen by creditor, Sterling Global Holdings. Marcus stared at the screen. The blue light reflected in his eyes, which were now wide with terror. "Babe?" Jessica walked in, holding a vending machine sandwich she'd found in the break room. "The elevator isn't working right. The security guard downstairs said our passes are invalid. What's going on?" Marcus didn't answer. He slumped back in his Herman Miller chair. The printer in the corner of the office suddenly whirred to life. It was the only sound in the silent office. Whir. Click. Whir. A single piece of paper slid out into the tray. Marcus walked over to it, his legs feeling like lead. He picked it up. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a bank notice. It was a simple, printed image. A photo of a 2018 Honda Civic, and below it, typed in elegant font, "For your transition." By Wednesday morning, Marcus Vance had aged 10 years. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night in his office, drinking the cheap whiskey Jessica had found in a desk drawer, making phone calls that went unanswered. The Vance Tech headquarters, usually buzzing with the energy of 20-something coders and marketing gurus, was eerily quiet. The news of the asset freeze had leaked. Rumors were spreading that payroll wouldn't clear on Friday. Half the staff hadn't shown up. "It's a mistake," Marcus shouted into his phone, pacing the length of his office. "Listen to me, Jim. I've known you since college. I just need a bridge loan. 200 grand. I'll pay you back double after the IPO next month." On the other end of the line, Jim Reynolds, a venture capitalist who had once toasted Marcus at his wedding, sounded distant. "Marcus, look, I can't. My compliance officer just flagged your name. You're on the blacklist." "What blacklist? I'm an innovator. I'm a CEO." "The Sterling blacklist, Marcus," Jim whispered, as if saying the name might summon a demon. "Do you have any idea who you pissed off? The memo went out to every major investment firm in Seattle, San Francisco, and New York at 6:00 a.m. Any entity providing financial assistance to Marcus Vance or Vance Tech will be considered hostile to Sterling global interests." "So?" Marcus spat. "Screw them. They can't control the whole market." "They are the market, Marcus. If I lend you a dime, they pull their funding from my firm. I have a wife and kids. Don't call me again." Click. Marcus threw the phone against the wall. It shattered, a piece of plastic skittering across the floor to land at the feet of Arthur Higgins. The lawyer looked disheveled. His tie was loose, and he had a coffee stain on his shirt. "We have one card left," Arthur said, his voice raspy. "The court of public opinion." Marcus looked up, eyes bloodshot. "What?" "She's a billionaire heiress hiding as a housewife," Arthur said, pacing. "Why?" "Because she's weird. Because she's secretive. We spin this. We go to the press. Billionaire deceives hard-working husband. The sterling fraud. We paint you as the victim of a cruel social experiment. We demand a settlement to keep our mouths shut." Marcus nodded slowly. A spark of hope returned. "Yes. She hates publicity. She spent 3 years hiding. She'll pay to make it go away." "I set up a meeting with the Seattle Chronicle," Arthur said. "Their investigative journalist, Barry White. He hates the big corps. He's meeting us at a dive bar in Pioneer Square in 20 minutes. No cameras, no wires." The bar smelled of stale beer and sawdust. Barry White was a heavy-set man with a cynical face, nursing a dark ale in a booth at the back. Marcus and Arthur slid in opposite him. Marcus wasted no time. "I have the story of the decade, Barry," Marcus said, leaning in. "Eleanor Sterling, the recluse heiress. She was my wife. She lived a lie for 3 years. I have proof. I have the divorce papers. I have photos of her signing them." Barry looked at Marcus, then at Arthur. He didn't take out a notepad. He didn't turn on a recorder. He just took a sip of his beer. "I know," Barry said. You know?" Marcus blinked. "Then why aren't you running it? This is huge." Barry chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper. It was the early evening edition of the Chronicle, hot off the press. He tossed it onto the table. Headline: "The Price of Freedom. Eleanor Sterling donates $100 million to domestic abuse charities following divorce." Marcus stared at the photo. It was Eleanor, looking radiant in a white power suit, shaking hands with the governor. "She beat you to it, kid," Barry said, tapping the paper. "She didn't hide. She came out swinging. The narrative is already set. She's the brave heiress who tried to live a normal life, only to be exploited by a narcissistic, cheating husband. That's you, by the way." Marcus snatched the paper. The article detailed everything. The affair with Jessica, referred to as a junior staffer. The financial coercion. The prenup. It painted Eleanor as a saint who had finally escaped a toxic marriage. "They have sources," Barry said. "Waitstaff at restaurants you went to. Your old neighbors. They all confirm you treated her like dirt. You're not the victim, Marcus. You're the villain of the week. Twitter is already trending #Team Eleanor." Arthur Higgins put his head in his hands. "It's over. She owns the narrative." "I can't print your sob story," Barry finished, finishing his beer. "Not because I'm scared of her, though I am, but because nobody cares. Everybody loves a comeback queen, and everybody hates a loser who fumbles the bag. Good luck, Marcus. You're gonna need it." Barry stood up and left. Marcus sat in the dark booth, the newspaper staring up at him. The headline seemed to mock him. Donated $100 million. She had given away 20 times his total net worth just to make a point. Just to show him that his fortune was her pocket change. "Arthur," Marcus whispered. "What do we do?" Arthur stood up. "You? I don't know. Me, I'm firing you as a client. I need to salvage my career before Sterling Legal files a complaint with the Bar Association. You can't leave me." "I just did," Arthur said, and walked out into the rain. Thursday, 2 days after the divorce. Marcus was alone in the server room of Vance Tech. The humiliation in the press was bad, but he could survive being hated. He couldn't survive being broke. The launch party for Vance AI was scheduled for Saturday. He had liquidated his personal 401k and maxed out 3 credit cards to keep the venue booked. If the product launch was a success, if the tech worked, he could get investors from China or Russia, people who didn't care about the Sterling blacklist. He just needed the code to work. "David!" Marcus yelled, staring at the monitor. "Why is the latency so high? The chatbot is taking 10 seconds to respond. It's supposed to be real time." David Miller, the lead developer, walked in. He looked exhausted. He hadn't been paid in 2 weeks. "I told you, Marcus," David said, rubbing his eyes. "The architecture is unstable. The patch we uploaded on Monday broke the core logic loop." "Then fix it. You're the genius coder." David laughed bitterly. "Me, Marcus, look at the commit logs." David typed a command. A list of code changes scrolled down the screen. "I wrote the front end," David said. "I did the interface. But the core algorithm, the predictive engine that made investors drool, I didn't write that. You didn't write that." "What are you talking about?" David pointed to the user tag on the code commits. The user was listed as admin EV. "EV," David said. "Eleanor Vance. Marcus, every night for the last 2 years, someone logged in between 2:00 a.m. and 5:00 a.m. from your home IP address. They rewrote the garbage code me and the junior devs put together and optimized it. I thought it was you. I thought you were some secret coding savant pulling all-nighters." Marcus froze. The memory hit him like a physical blow. He remembered waking up in the middle of the night, seeing the light on in the study. He would walk in and see Eleanor typing furiously on his laptop. "Just organizing your files, honey," she would say, quickly closing the window. "Go back to bed." He had believed her. He had thought she was playing solitaire or organizing his calendar. He had called her a secretary. "She wrote it," Marcus whispered. "She wrote the AI." "Well, she's not writing it anymore," David said. "And without her organizing, the system is degrading. It's a house of cards, Marcus. If we launch on Saturday, it's going to crash. Live on stage." Marcus felt the room spin. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the name. She was the talent. He was nothing but a suit. "Can we revert to the previous version?" Marcus asked desperately. "We can't. The license keys for the core libraries, they expired yesterday. Renew them." "We can't," David said, looking at Marcus with pity. "The libraries are proprietary. They belong to a holding company called Nebula Systems." Marcus scrambled to his computer. He searched for Nebula Systems. Owner: Sterling Global Technology Division. She hadn't just written the code. She had built the foundation of his company using her own family's proprietary tech, letting him use it for free while they were married. And the moment the ink on the divorce papers was dry, she had revoked the license. She hadn't just taken the car and the money. She had taken his brain. "She knew," Marcus said, slumping against the server rack. "She knew this would happen. She planned it." His phone buzzed, a text from Jessica. Jessica: "Hey babe, bad news. The caterers for the launch party just cancelled. They said their payment was declined. Also, I think we should see other people. My mum says you're bad for my aura. Don't call me." Marcus dropped the phone. He looked at the server lights blinking in the dark room. He had one option left. The option he swore he would never take. He had to beg. He ran out of the server room, down the stairs, and into the lobby. He jumped into his Porsche, which he now knew he couldn't afford gas for, and sped toward the private airfield. He knew she was back. The news said she had returned from Zurich this morning. She was hosting a reintroduction gala at the Sterling estate tonight. He wasn't invited, but he was going to get in. The drive to Mercer Island usually took 20 minutes from downtown Seattle. Tonight, Marcus made it in 12. The Sterling estate wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of privacy, situated on 10 acres of prime waterfront land. As Marcus rounded the final bend, he saw the glow. Massive floodlights illuminated the iron gates, and a line of limousines, Bentleys, Maybachs, Rolls-Royces, snaked down the driveway, delivering the elite of the Pacific Northwest to the gala. Marcus pulled his Porsche up to the security checkpoint. The car was dirty, coated in mud from his reckless driving, a stark contrast to the gleaming black vehicles around him. He rolled down the window. The rain soaked his sleeve immediately. "I'm here to see Eleanor," Marcus shouted over the engine noise. "I'm Marcus Vance. I'm a close associate." The guard wasn't old, Mr. Henderson from the office building. This was a private contractor, built like a linebacker, wearing an earpiece. He looked at a tablet. "Name isn't on the list, sir. Turn around." "Check again," Marcus screamed, desperation clawing at his throat. "Marcus Vance. I was her husband for 3 years. I need to talk to her. It's a matter of national security regarding her technology." The guard didn't blink. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to reverse the vehicle. You are blocking the entrance for Senator Mitchell." Marcus looked in his rearview mirror. A black SUV with government plates was honking behind him. "I'm not moving!" Marcus slammed the car into park. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain. "Eleanor! Eleanor! I know you can hear me!" He ran towards the gates. Before he could touch the iron bars, 2 shadows materialized from the darkness. Uniformed guards. They grabbed him by the arms, not roughly, but with the immovable force of hydraulic presses. "Let me go! I built that company! She stole my code!" Marcus thrashed, his expensive shoes slipping in the mud. "Mr. Vance!" The voice was calm, cutting through the chaos like a knife. The gates slowly swung open. Not all the way, just enough for a man to step through. Sebastian stood there. He was holding that same black umbrella. He looked at Marcus with an expression that wasn't anger. It was profound disappointment. "You are causing a scene, Marcus," Sebastian said quietly. "Miss Sterling is entertaining guests. The governor is here. The Japanese ambassador is here. Do you really want to be arrested for trespassing in front of them?" "I want to speak to my wife," Marcus panted, water dripping from his nose. "She is not your wife," Sebastian corrected. "She is the CEO of the company that owns your debt, and she has granted you 2 minutes. Come." Sebastian turned and walked up the driveway. Marcus, stunned, shook off the guards and followed. They didn't go to the main house, where the golden light and the sound of a string quartet spilled out onto the lawn. Sebastian led him to a small, glass-walled conservatory near the rose gardens. "Wait here," Sebastian said, and closed the door. Marcus stood in the conservatory, shivering. He was surrounded by exotic orchids and rare ferns. The humidity was high, fogging up the glass. He could see the silhouettes of the party guests in the distance, laughing, drinking, living the life he thought he had earned. Then the door on the far side opened. Eleanor stepped in. She was breathtaking. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like water. Diamonds, real, heavy, vintage diamonds, glittered at her throat and ears. Her hair was styled in intricate waves, but it was her eyes that stopped him. They were clear, sharp, and utterly unyielding. She didn't offer him a drink. She didn't offer him a towel. She stayed 10 feet away, flanked by 2 silent bodyguards. "You have mud on my floor, Marcus," she said. Her voice was cool, devoid of the tremor it used to have when he yelled at her. "Eleanor," Marcus choked out. He fell to his knees. It wasn't a calculated move. His legs just gave out. "Eleanor, please, I'm sorry, I was an idiot. I was stressed. The company, the pressure." "Get up," she said. "You look ridiculous." "I can't lose the company, Ellie. It's my life. I know you wrote the code. I know you're the genius. I admit it. You were always the smart one. Come back. We can be partners. 50-50. No, 60-40. You take majority share. Just unfreeze the accounts. Let me launch on Saturday." He looked up at her, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I love you. I know I messed up with Jessica. But it was just a fling. You're the one I married." Eleanor watched him for a long moment. She tilted her head, as if studying a fascinating, repulsive insect. "You don't love me, Marcus," she said softly. "You love the way I made your life easy. You love that I fixed your code, cleaned your house, and absorbed your temper till you could feel like a big man." She took a step closer. "And you want to be partners?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Marcus, I don't partner with my employees, and I certainly don't partner with liabilities." "Employees?" Marcus scrambled to his feet, slipping slightly on the damp tile. A flash of his old, arrogant anger returned, masking his terror. "I founded Vance Tech. It's my name on the building. I'm the face on the magazine covers. You can't just rewrite history because you're hurt, Eleanor." He stepped closer, trying to loom over her, a tactic that had worked in their kitchen, but failed miserably here in her palace. "I built that company from a laptop in a coffee shop. I grinded for 3 years while you stayed home." Eleanor didn't flinch. She simply took a sip of water from a crystal glass on a nearby table, looking at him over the rim. "Did you?" she asked softly. "Let's review history, Marcus. Who paid for the patent filings? $5,000. You didn't have it." I got a grant," Marcus stammered. "You got a check from a shell company called Blue Heron Holdings," Eleanor corrected. "My shell company. Who co-signed the lease for the downtown office when your credit score was 580? Who quietly transferred funds from a Swiss trust into your angel investors account so he would discover you and write that first check?" Marcus froze. He remembered the angel investor, Mr. Cavill, a man who had seemed to appear out of nowhere, believing in Marcus's vision when no one else did. "Cavill," Marcus whispered. "Works for my family office," Eleanor said. "He's my father's golf partner. I asked him to invest in you. I wanted to see if, given every advantage, capital, connections, a stable home life, you could become the man you pretended to be. I wanted to see if you could be a partner worthy of me." She sighed, a sound of genuine exhaustion. She walked over to a blooming orchid and touched a petal. "I gave you the keys to the kingdom, Marcus, and you used them to lock me out." "So what?" Marcus sneered, his face turning red. "You played a game. Congratulations. But Vance Tech is still mine. You can't touch the IP. The code is mine." "The code," Eleanor laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp, like glass breaking. "Marcus, the code is garbage. The only reason it worked was because I spent 4 hours every night fixing your syntax errors while you slept. And now that I've stopped, Your system is degrading, but that doesn't matter anymore." She signaled to Sebastian. The large man stepped forward, placing a heavy leather folder on the glass table. "Because Vance Tech doesn't belong to you anymore," Eleanor said. "At 7:45 p.m. tonight, the Board of Directors of Sterling Global Technology formally executed a clause in your debt agreement. It's called a distressed asset acquisition. We bought the debt, we called the loans, and since you have zero liquidity, we seized the collateral." Marcus stared at the folder. "What collateral?" "Everything," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The servers, the office lease, the chairs, the coffee machine, the brand name, and the intellectual property." You can't." Marcus felt the room spinning. "I can. And I did." Eleanor opened the folder. Inside was a termination notice. "As the new owner of Vance Tech, my first act as chairwoman was to dissolve the company. We are shutting it down, Marcus. Tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. We're wiping the servers." "You're killing my company," Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. "It's worth millions. The IPO was going to be huge." "The company is worth nothing without the algorithm I wrote," Eleanor snapped, her eyes flashing with sudden fire. "I didn't buy it to run it, Marcus. I bought it to delete it. I am erasing your legacy. By Monday, Vance Tech will be nothing more than a bad memory." The brutality of it crushed him. She had spent millions of dollars just to wipe his name off the map. It was a level of power he couldn't comprehend. "However," Eleanor continued, her voice returning to that terrifying calm, "I am not a monster. I know you have debts. I know you have no home. So I am offering you a lifeline." She tapped a document in the folder. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. It states that you will never mention my name, the Sterling name, or our marriage again. You will not write a book. You will not go to the press. You will leave Seattle, and you will not return for a period of 10 years. "And if I sign?" Marcus asked, his voice hollow. "I will give you a severance check," Eleanor said. "How much? 5 million? If you're destroying my company, give me my buyout." Eleanor smiled. $100,000. Marcus stared at her, mouth agape. "That's a joke. That's an insult." "That is generosity," Eleanor said, cold as ice. "It is enough to move to, let's say, Ohio. Rent a small apartment. Get a job in IT support. Find a nice girl who doesn't know who you are. And maybe, just maybe, treat her better than you treated the woman who gave you the world." She dropped a heavy gold fountain pen on the table. It clattered loudly in the silent conservatory. "Sign it, Marcus, or walk out of here with nothing. And if you walk out, my lawyers at Halloway, Finch and Associates, will file fraud charges against you tomorrow for the falsified user data on your loan applications. You'll go to prison, Marcus. Federal prison." Marcus looked at the pen. He looked at the rain battering the glass walls. He looked at the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had discarded for a 23-year-old intern. He realized now that he had been a child playing house, while she was the architect of the reality he lived in. He was beaten, thoroughly, completely beaten. His hand shook as he picked up the pen. He bent over the table. Scritch, scratch. He signed his name. Marcus Vance. He handed the pen back to her. She didn't take it. She just pointed to the door. "Sebastian has your check," she said, turning her back on him. "Goodbye, Marcus." "Ellie," he tried one last time. "She doesn't exist," Eleanor said without turning around. "Leave." Marcus turned and walked out of the warmth of the conservatory. As soon as he stepped outside, the cold wind hit him. Sebastian was waiting by the path. He handed Marcus a plain white envelope. "The check, sir," Sebastian said. Marcus took it. He looked towards the driveway where he had left his Porsche. "My car," Marcus mumbled. "The company car," Sebastian corrected gently. "It is now the property of Sterling Global. We have already logged the keys. It will be sold at auction next month." Marcus looked at the long, dark driveway. "How am I supposed to leave? It's pouring rain. It's a 3-mile walk to the main road." Sebastian adjusted his umbrella, staying perfectly dry while Marcus stood in the mud. "You have legs, Mr. Vance," Sebastian said, "and the Honda Civic you assigned to Madame Eleanor. We had it towed to the impound lot in Tacoma. If you hurry, you might be able to bail it out with your severance check before they crush it." Sebastian offered a small, polite bow. "Good evening, sir." Marcus stood there for a moment, the envelope clutching in his wet hand. He looked back at the house. Through the glass walls of the conservatory, he saw Eleanor join the party. A waiter handed her a glass of champagne. She laughed at something a guest said, looking radiant, powerful, and free. She didn't look back. Marcus turned his collar up against the storm and began the long walk into the darkness. Inside the conservatory, the music swelled. Eleanor took a sip of the vintage champagne. The bitter taste of the last 3 years was finally gone. "Are you all right, madam?" Sebastian asked, appearing silently at her side after locking the gate. "Yes, Sebastian," Eleanor said, watching the headlights of the limousines sparkle in the distance. "I'm not just all right. I'm finally myself." She set the glass down. "Now let's go inside. I have an empire to run." Marcus thought Eleanor was nothing more than a stepping stone, a background character in the movie of his life. He mistook her silence for weakness and her kindness for stupidity. But he learned the hard way that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the cards. Eleanor didn't just leave. She ascended, proving that true power isn't about how loudly you shout, but about what you're capable of doing when pushed too far. Marcus walked away with a check and a lesson, but Eleanor walked away with her dignity and the last laugh. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve to lose everything, or was Eleanor's revenge too harsh? If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never judge a book by its cover. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. The champagne was a 1996 Dom Perignon, chilled to exactly 45 degrees. The suit was bespoke Italian silk, costing more than most people's cars, and the man wearing it, Marcus Thorne, believed he was untouchable. He stood at the pinnacle of New York's elite, holding a contract that gave him total control over the city's largest architectural emperor. He thought the war was over. He thought the enemy was buried. But as he raised his glass to toast his own genius, he forgot the one rule of survival. The person holding the knife is usually the one smiling the brightest at your side. Marcus celebrated winning early until his wife picked up the microphone and mentioned one name. Just one name. And suddenly, the champagne didn't taste like victory anymore. It tasted like ash. The penthouse of the Steinway Tower on 57th Street offered a view that made you feel like a god looking down on an ant farm. Tonight, the ants were sleeping, but the gods were drinking. Marcus Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass, his reflection superimposed over the glittering expanse of Central Park. He adjusted his cufflinks, platinum, engraved with the family crest he had invented for himself 10 years ago. Behind him, the hum of 50 distinct conversations blended into a symphony of wealth. "You look like a man who just bought the world," a voice said. Marcus turned. It was Julian Vane, his CFO, and the only man Marcus trusted to bury a body, metaphorically speaking. Julian was holding 2 crystal flutes. "Not the world, Julian," Marcus said, taking the glass. "Just the foundation it sits on." "Did the transfer clear?" "Confirmed at 4:58 p.m. The Delaware Chancery Court signed off on the acquisition. Vantage Dynamics is officially a subsidiary of Thorn Capital." Marcus took a sip. The liquid was crisp, biting, and perfect. "And the old man?" "Arthur Sterling," Julian chuckled darkly. "Escorted out of his own building by security an hour ago. I heard he was weeping in the lobby." "It's done, Marcus. The hostile takeover is complete." "You won." "We won," Marcus corrected, though he didn't mean it. In his head, it was always I. The room was filled with the sharks of Wall Street, the vultures of private equity, and the peacocks of high society. They were all there to kiss the ring. Marcus had done the impossible. He had dismantled the Sterling family legacy, a dynasty that had stood for 80 years, in less than 6 months. He had leveraged their debt, bought their board members, and exposed Arthur Sterling's offshore accounts to the SEC. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was legendary. Marcus scanned the room for the crowning jewel of his life, his wife, Elena. She was standing near the grand piano, wearing a dress of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light around her. She was listening to Senator Claiborne, nodding politely, her posture impeccable. Elena was the perfect corporate wife, silent when she needed to be, charming when required, and absolutely stunning on a magazine cover. She caught his eye across the room. She didn't smile. She simply raised her glass in a small, almost imperceptible salute. Marcus felt a surge of pride. She understood. She knew what this night meant. It wasn't just about money. It was about erasing his past. Marcus wasn't born in a penthouse. He was born in a trailer in Ohio, with a father who drank his paycheck and a mother who cried silently while washing dishes. Tonight proved that Marcus Thorn wasn't that boy anymore. He was the king of New York. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice boomed as he tapped a spoon against his glass. The room quieted instantly. The silence was heavy with respect and fear. "If I could have your attention." Marcus stepped away from the window, moving towards the center of the room. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. "Tonight is historic," Julian continued. "Tonight we celebrate not just a merger, but a revolution. Thorn Capital has officially acquired Vantage Dynamics. Please raise your glasses to the visionary who made this happen. The man who sees the future before it happens, Mr. Marcus Thorn." "Hear, hear!" the crowd roared. Marcus bathed in the applause. He stepped up to the small podium set up near the piano. He looked at the faces. Judge Harrison from the Southern District, the CEO of Blackwood Oil, the heiress to the Kensington fortune. They all belonged to him now. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice smooth baritone. "They told me you can't fight history. They told me the Sterling family was too established, too powerful. But dinosaurs were established too, and we know what happened to them." Laughter rippled through the room. "We are the meteor," Marcus said, his grin sharpening. "Tomorrow we begin restructuring. We cut the dead weight. We build a new legacy. And I want to thank my team, my investors, and of course, Oh, he gestured to Elena. She began to walk toward him. My beautiful wife, Elena, who has stood by me through every late night and every battle. Come up here, darling. Elena ascended the small stage. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She took the microphone from his hand. Her hand was cold. Marcus expected her to say the usual things. I'm so proud. He worked too hard. This is a dream come true. Elena looked at the crowd. Then she looked at Marcus. Her eyes were different tonight. Usually they were warm, like honey. Tonight they were dark, opaque, like the bottom of a deep well. Marcus loves to tell stories about winning, Elena said softly into the microphone. Her voice was steady, clearer than crystal. He loves the story of the self-made man. But every story has a rough draft that gets thrown in the trash. Doesn't it, Marcus? Marcus frowned slightly, keeping his smile fixed. Eleanor is a perfectionist, he joked to the crowd. Nobody laughed. I've been thinking a lot about the past tonight, Elena continued, ignoring his interruption. About how we got here, about the sacrifices, and specifically about the paperwork. The air in the room shifted. It went from celebratory to confused. Julian Vane took a step forward, sensing something was wrong. Elena, Marcus whispered, leaning in, his hand gripping her elbow gently but firmly. Wrap it up, honey. She didn't pull away. She just looked at him. And for the first time in their 7-year marriage, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't fear yet. It was the primitive instinct of a predator realizing there is something else in the tall grass. I'd like to propose a toast, Elena said, her voice rising, to the one person who made this acquisition actually possible, the person Marcus forgot to mention. Marcus's mind raced. Who? The banker at Goldman Sachs? The private investigator who found the dirt on Sterling? Elena smiled. It was a terrifying, broken smile. To understand the silence that was about to fall over the room, you have to understand the marriage of Marcus and Eleanor Thorne. On paper, they were a merger, not a romance. Marcus had met her 7 years ago at a charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She was Eleanor Vance then, a curator with an obscure background and an impeccable eye for fraudulent art. She was quiet, observant, and possessed a pedigree that Marcus lacked. She knew which fork to use. She knew how to pronounce French wines. She smoothed out his rough edges. Marcus married her because she was an asset. He assumed she married him for the security. He was wrong. 3 days before the party, in the master bedroom of that same penthouse, Marcus had been frantic. The deal with Vantage Dynamics was stalling. Arthur Sterling, the stubborn old CEO, was refusing to sell his controlling shares. He's blocking the vote, Marcus had raged, throwing his tie onto the bed. The old fool is going to burn the company to the ground, rather than let me have it. Elena had been sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair. Arthur has a weakness, Marcus. He has no vices, no mistresses, no gambling debts. I've looked. He has a conscience, Elena had said, watching Marcus in the mirror. And he has a goddaughter. Marcus stopped. I didn't know he had family. He doesn't, but his late partner, the co-founder of Vantage, had a daughter. Arthur raised her from a distance. He sends her money through a trust called the Orion Fund. If you threaten the fund, if you threaten to expose where that money comes from. Marcus had turned to her, eyes wide. How do you know this? I hear things, Marcus. People talk to the wives. They think we're just furniture." Armed with this information, Marcus had gone to the meeting the next day. He sat across from Arthur Sterling in the boardroom. He slid a folder across the table. It contained fabricated evidence that the Orion Fund was laundering money. It was a bluff, a dirty, nasty bluff. "Sign the company over, Arthur," Marcus had sneered, "or the girl goes to prison for tax fraud. I'll ruin her life." Arthur Sterling had turned grey. He loved that girl, whoever she was, more than his company. He signed. Marcus came home that night and kissed Elena passionately. "You're a genius," he told her. "You saved the deal." He never asked how she knew. He never asked who the girl was. He never asked why Arthur Sterling had looked at him with such profound pity before signing the papers. Marcus was a man who looked at the horizon, never at the ground beneath his feet. Now, back at the party, the ground was beginning to shake. Elena held the microphone. The room was waiting. "Marcus," Elena said, turning fully to face him, "you signed the final deed of transfer at 4:00 p.m. today, correct?" "Yes," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Elena, what are you doing?" "And the contract states that Thorn Capital acquires all assets, liabilities, and existing legal obligations of Vantage Dynamics. That is standard boilerplate language. Stop this." "But you didn't read the addendum to the Orion Trust, did you? The one Arthur Sterling added this morning, 1 hour before he signed with you." The room was deadly silent. Julian Vane dropped his glass. It shattered, but no one looked at the mess. "What addendum?" Marcus demanded. His heart was hammering against his ribs. "The poison pill," Eleanor whispered. "Arthur invoked the Founder's Protection Clause. It states that in the event of a hostile takeover, the voting rights of the company do not transfer to the buyer. They revert to the primary beneficiary of the Orion Trust." Marcus laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous. The beneficiary is some random goddaughter. I'll buy her out. I'll pay her double. What's her name? I'll write a check right now." He pulled out his checkbook, trying to regain control of the room, trying to make it a performance. "Come on, Lena. Tell us the name so we can all go back to drinking. Who is this girl?" Elena looked at the crowd. She took a deep breath. "The name of the beneficiary," Elena began. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. These were people who understood power, and they smelled blood. They watched Marcus Thorn, the man who had been invincible 5 minutes ago, now sweating under the harsh lights of the chandelier. Marcus looked at Julian. Julian was frantically typing on his phone, his face pale. He looked up at Marcus and shook his head slightly. "Something is wrong. Something is very wrong." "The name," Marcus barked, losing his composure. "Who is she?" Elena smiled. It was a smile of absolute liberation. "The beneficiary of the Orion Trust is Silas Vance." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. The air left the room. Marcus blinked. "Vance? Who is Silas Vance? That's a man's name." From the back of the room, near the catering entrance, a man stepped forward. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a worn grey suit that looked 20 years out of date. He leaned on a cane. He looked frail, perhaps in his late 60s, but his eyes were sharp, burning with a cold intelligence. The crowd parted for him, confused. "Hello, Marcus," the man said. His voice was gravelly, damaged by years of smoke or perhaps silence. Marcus stared. He didn't recognize the man. "Security!" Marcus yelled. "Who let this man in?" "I invited him," Elena said calmly. Who is he? He's my father, Elena said. The room gasped. Marcus froze. Your father? You told me your father was dead. You told me he died in a car crash in 1999. I lied, Elena said. Just like you lied to your investors. Just like you lied to Arthur Sterling. She stepped down from the podium and walked over to the old man, taking his arm. Let me introduce you properly, Elena addressed the room. This is Silas Vance, but 30 years ago, before he changed his name, you might have known him as Silas Sterling. A shockwave went through the older guests. Sterling? The CEO of Blackwood Oil whispered. Arthur's brother? The one who went to prison? The one who was framed, Elena corrected, her voice cutting through the whispers. She turned to Marcus, her eyes blazing. 30 years ago, Vantage Dynamics was run by two brothers, Arthur and Silas. But there was a third partner, a financial advisor who cooked the books, stole millions, and framed my father for it. My father went to prison for 12 years for crimes he didn't commit. Arthur knew the truth but was too cowardly to speak up because the third partner threatened to destroy the company. Marcus felt the room spinning. What does this have to do with me? I was a child 30 years ago. The third partner, Silas Vance spoke up, his voice shaking with repressed rage. The man who framed me, the man who stole my life, was Robert Thorne. Marcus felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the piano for support. My father, Marcus whispered. My father was a drunk, a nobody. Your father was a criminal genius before the bottle took him, Silas said. He built his initial fortune by stealing mine. He used my money to buy the trailer park you grew up in, to pay for your first semester at business school. Every dollar you started with was stolen from my family. That's a lie, Marcus spat. He left me nothing. He left you the instinct to steal, Elena said. And you did it perfectly. You stole Arthur's company today, but you fell for the trap. What trap? Marcus roared. Elena held up a folder. The Orion Trust holds 51% of the voting shares of Vantage Dynamics. Arthur signed them over to the trust this morning, and the trust documents state that upon the transfer of the company to any entity related to the Thorne family, the beneficiary gains immediate, irrevocable control. She pointed at her father. Silas Vance is now the majority shareholder of Vantage Dynamics, Elena declared. And by extension, because of the cross-collateralization clause you signed to fund this deal, he now owns the controlling interest in Thorne Capital too. Marcus looked at Julian. Julian was white as a sheet. She's right, Marcus. The cross-collateralization. We put up Thorne Capital's assets to secure the loan for the Vantage deal. If the voting rights revert, we are in default. The new owner of Vantage can call the loan immediately. And I am calling it, Silas said. Right now. Marcus stared at them. The walls were closing in. The champagne glass on the table next to him looked like a grenade. You planned this, Marcus whispered, looking at his wife. The whole marriage. 7 years. You planned this? 7 years is a long time, Marcus, Elena said, stepping closer to him so only he could hear. I cooked your meals. I ironed your shirts. I listened to your ego every single night. I waited. I waited for you to get greedy enough to go after Arthur. I knew you couldn't resist. You wanted the crown. She reached out and adjusted his bow tie. Now you have it, she whispered, but the kingdom is gone. For 10 seconds, the penthouse was a tableau of frozen violence. Marcus Thorne stood gripping the grand piano, his knuckles white, his chest heaving against the silk of his shirt. He looked at the hundreds of faces staring back at him. Faces that, just minutes ago, were filled with adoration. Now they held a mixture of pity and predatory amusement. Marcus was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a street fighter in a tailored suit. If the law was against him, he would use force. If force failed, he would use chaos. "Get them out!" Marcus snarled. He pointed a shaking finger at Elena and the old man, Silas. "Security! Bronson! Get these trespassers out of my home immediately!" Bronson, the head of security, a massive former linebacker who had been on Marcus's payroll for 5 years, stepped out of the shadows. He was wearing an earpiece and a grim expression. He walked toward the stage. Marcus exhaled, his confidence flickering back. "Drag them out, and take their phones. I want them arrested for corporate espionage." Bronson stopped. He wasn't looking at Elena. He was looking at his phone. He tapped the screen, read a message, and then looked up at Marcus. "I can't do that, Mr. Thorne," Bronson said, his voice deep and flat. "What did you say to me?" Marcus shouted, stepping off the stage, his face flushing red. "I pay you $200,000 a year to do what I say. Throw this old man out." "Actually," Bronson said, "you paid me. Past tense. But as of the timestamp on this transfer," he held up the phone, "my contract is with Vantage Dynamics Security Corps, and since the ownership change just authenticated on the server, I answer to the majority shareholder." Bronson turned to Silas Vance. The old man leaned on his cane, looking frail but immovable. "Mr. Vance," Bronson said respectfully, "do you want these guests removed?" Silas looked around the room. He looked at the champagne fountains, the caviar stations, the excessive display of wealth built on his stolen inheritance. "No," Silas said. "Let them stay. I want witnesses." Marcus felt the floor tilting. He looked at Julian Vane, his CFO. "Julian, call the lawyers. Call the emergency line at Skadden Arps. Get an injunction. Stop the transfer." Julian was backing away. He was frantically deleting emails on his phone. He looked up, his eyes wide with panic. "It's too late, Marcus," Julian hissed. "The cross-collateralization. I told you it was risky. The default trigger is automatic. The bank's algorithms have already frozen the operating accounts. My credit card just got declined for the Uber I tried to order." "You coward!" Marcus lunged at Julian, grabbing him by the lapels of his tuxedo. "Fix it! You built this structure!" "Get off me!" Julian shrieked, shoving Marcus back. Marcus stumbled, his foot catching on the edge of a rug. He fell backward, crashing into a waiter carrying a tray of crystal flutes. The sound was deafening, shattering glass, the clatter of metal, and the gasp of the crowd. Marcus Thorne, the King of New York, was lying on the floor in a puddle of cheap soda water and broken glass. Champagne dripped from his hair. A camera flash went off, then another, then a dozen. Marcus looked up. The guests, the sharks, the heiresses, the politicians, had their phones out. They were recording. They weren't his friends. They were an audience, and this was the best show in town. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the wet floor, humiliated. He wiped his face. He looked at Elena. She hadn't moved. She was watching him with that same terrifying, blank expression. "Is this what you wanted?" Marcus screamed at her, his voice cracking. "To humiliate me? You think this changes anything? I still have the offshore accounts. I still have the Cayman holdings. I will bury you in litigation for 20 years. You'll be dead before you see a dime, old man." Elena shook her head slowly. "You don't get it, Marcus. This isn't just about the company. You think I spent 7 years just waiting to bankrupt you?" She reached into her small clutch purse. She didn't pull out a compact or a lipstick. She pulled out a silver badge. Marcus stared at it. It wasn't a police badge. It was something heavier. "I'm not just a curator, Marcus," she said softly. "I haven't been an active curator since 2018. She flipped the badge open. Elena Vance, Special Agent, IRS. Criminal Investigation Division. The room went so quiet, you could hear the wind howling outside the skyscraper. "The money your father stole from mine?" Elena said. "He didn't just steal it. He laundered it through a shell company in Panama. A shell company that you reactivated 3 years ago to hide the bribes you paid to the zoning commission." Marcus stopped breathing. "The takeover of Vantage Dynamics wasn't the trap, Marcus," Elena said, stepping closer, her heels crunching on the broken glass. "The takeover was the bait. We needed you to move the funds. We needed you to consolidate the assets so we could trace the origin. And today, at 4:58 p.m., when you signed that deal, you moved $400 million of dirty money into a U.S. banking system." She smiled. "You didn't just lose your company, honey. You just committed federal wire fraud. And you did it in front of the entire Southern District of New York." The doors to the penthouse burst open. But it wasn't catering. 6 men and women in windbreakers, emblazoned with FBI and IRS CI, stormed into the room. They moved with the precision of a SWAT team, but with the quiet lethality of forensic accountants. "Federal agents, nobody move!" a voice boomed. The crowd of socialites shrieked and scattered, pressing themselves against the glass walls, desperate to dissociate themselves from the blast radius. Leading the agents was a tall man, with steel-grey hair and a face carved out of granite. Assistant U.S. Attorney David Grant. Marcus knew him. He had donated to Grant's campaign fund 2 years ago. Grant walked straight up to Marcus, stepping over the broken glass. He didn't offer a handshake. "Marcus Thorne," Grant said, his voice carrying the weight of the federal government. "I have a warrant for your arrest." "On what grounds?" Marcus spat, though his voice lacked its usual fire. "This is a civil dispute. My wife is having a psychotic break. Charges include racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the United States," Grant recited, pulling a folded document from his jacket. "And thanks to the cooperation of a confidential informant inside your home," Grant nodded at Elena. "We have the audio recordings of you ordering the bribes for the city council. We have the emails where you instructed your team to falsify the Vantage valuation. We have it all." "Julian!" Marcus screamed, looking for his CFO. But Julian Vane was already in handcuffs near the piano. He was weeping openly, babbling to an agent. "I was just following orders. He forced me. I have logs. I can give you the Cayman keys." Marcus looked back at Elena. She was standing next to her father, Silas. An agent handed her a jacket to cover her shoulders, but she refused it. She looked at Marcus as another agent approached him with zip ties. "Turn around, Mr. Thorne," the agent said. "No," Marcus said. He backed away toward the balcony door. The cold night air was seeping in. "No, you can't touch me. Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," Silas Vance spoke up. "You're the son of Robert Thorne, a thief, and tonight you're going to join him in history." Marcus looked at the balcony. For a split second, the thought crossed his mind. The ultimate escape. The final headline. Thorne leaps. It would be tragic. It would be romantic. But Marcus was a narcissist, and narcissists love themselves too much to die. He stopped backing away. He straightened his jacket, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. He held out his hands. "Call my lawyer," Marcus said coldly to Grant. "Call Alan Dershowitz. Call whoever is the most expensive shark in this city. You're going to regret this, Grant. I'll sue this department into the ground." The agent snapped the plastic cuffs onto Marcus's wrists. They were tight, uncomfortably tight. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent droned as they marched Marcus toward the elevator, the same elevator he had ridden up in 3 hours ago as a king. He passed Elena. He stopped. The agents tried to push him, but he dug his heels in. "Was any of it real?" Marcus asked, his voice low, desperate. 7 years, Elena. The trip to Brave, the nights in the Hamptons, when I was sick. You took care of me. Was it all a lie?" Elena looked him in the eye. Her expression softened, just for a fraction of a second, revealing the exhaustion underneath the victory. "The first year," she said quietly. "The first year, I tried to find something good in you. I thought maybe you were different from your father. I wanted to believe that you didn't know about the stolen money." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, jasmine and sandalwood, the scent of his home. "But then I found the letter," she whispered. "The letter from your father that you kept in the safe deposit box. The one where he explained everything. How he framed Silas. How he built the emir on blood. And underneath it, you had written a note to yourself. Never apologize. Never return it. Grow it." Elena's eyes hardened into diamonds. "That was the night I stopped being your wife, Marcus, and started being your case officer." The elevator doors pinged open. The agents shoved Marcus inside. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was his wife, standing next to her father, holding a glass of that 1996 Dom Perignon. She raised it to him, and then the doors shut, sealing him in a steel box. The holding cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in Lower Manhattan was a stark contrast to the penthouse. It smelled of bleach, stale sweat, and despair. Marcus sat on the metal cot. His tuxedo was wrinkled, the silk stained. His tie was gone, confiscated as a suicide risk. His shoelaces were gone too. He looked like a fallen prince in a dungeon. It had been 6 hours. No bail. The judge had deemed him a flight risk due to the offshore accounts that, ironically, were currently frozen by the feds. The heavy steel door buzzed and clanked open. Marcus jumped up. "My lawyer, is Alan here?" It wasn't a lawyer. It was a guard. "Visitor," the guard grunted. 5 minutes. No contact. Marcus walked into the visitation room. He sat behind the thick plexiglass. He expected Julian, maybe trying to cut a deal, or perhaps a high-powered attorney. But it was Elena. She had changed clothes. She was wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. She looked younger. She looked lighter. Marcus grabbed the phone on the wall. "You came to gloat?" he sneered into the receiver. "Or did you come to realize you made a mistake? You know they can't hold me. The evidence is circumstantial." Elena picked up her phone. She looked tired. "The evidence is overwhelming, Marcus." Julian flipped. He gave them the server passwords. He gave them the encrypted chats where you ordered the harassment of the zoning board members. "It's over. You're looking at 20 years. Minimum." Marcus slammed his fist against the glass. "I'll get out. I always win. I'll buy the jury." "With what?" Eleanor asked calmly. "I have money hidden where you'll never find it." "The crypto wallets?" Elena asked. "The ones on the hard drive you hid inside the sculpture in the foyer?" Marcus froze. "We found those an hour ago," Elena said. "Silas remembered that you always liked that sculpture because it looked like a fortress. He smashed it with his cane. It was quite therapeutic for him." Marcus slumped in his chair, the fight drained out of him. The money was gone. The power was gone. "Why are you here, Elena?" he whispered. "If you hate me so much, why come?" "I brought you something," she said. She held up a piece of paper against the glass. It was a photocopy of an old photograph. Marcus squinted. It was a picture of two men standing in front of a small hardware store. One was his father, Robert Thorne. Young, smiling, handsome. The other was Silas Vance. They had their arms around each other. They looked like brothers. "They were best friends, Marcus," Elena said softly. "Before the greed, before the betrayal. They built Vantage together because they wanted to build things that lasted. They wanted to build homes for families." She lowered the photo. "I didn't do this for revenge," Elena said. "I did it for balance. You and your father, you were a cancer on that legacy. You thought winning meant having the most money at the end of the night. But you forgot what you were building." "I built an empire," Marcus cried. "No," Elena said, standing up. "You built a cage, and now you're living in it." She hung up the phone. "Elena!" Marcus screamed, banging the receiver against the glass. "Elena, don't walk away. I made you. You were nothing without me." She stopped at the door. She didn't turn around. She just paused, her hand on the heavy metal handle. "I was never nothing, Marcus," she said to the empty room, not even using the phone, so he could only read her lips. "I was the person watching you when you thought no one was looking." She walked out. Marcus sat alone in the fluorescent hum of the prison. He looked at the photocopy she had left taped to the glass from the other side. His father's smile mocked him. He was truly alone. But the story wasn't quite over. Because in the world of the high-stakes elite, when a king falls, the wolves don't just eat the body. They come for the scraps. And Marcus Thorne had one secret left. One secret that even Elena didn't know. A secret that lived not in a bank account, but in the mind of a woman named Isabella. 6 months had passed since the night of the long knives at the Steinway Tower. The scandal had been the feast of the decade for the New York press. Marcus Thorne, the untouchable golden boy, was now inmate number 74321 at the MCC, awaiting a trial that everyone knew was just a formality. The evidence Elena and her team had compiled was mountainous. It wasn't a question of if he would be convicted, but of how many lifetimes he would spend behind bars. Elena sat in a small, cramped office at the IRS field office in Lower Manhattan. Her corner office at the penthouse, with its view of Central Park, felt like a fever dream from another life. She preferred this. The fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee, the endless stacks of paper. This was reality. She was tired. The adrenaline of the takedown had faded, replaced by the tedious grind of case preparation. They had seized everything: the Hamptons estate, the fleet of luxury cars, the art collection, most of which Elena remembered buying, knowing it would one day be evidence. Silas Vance, her father, had been reinstated as chairman of Vantage Dynamics amid cheers from the shareholders, but the victory tasted like ashes in Elena's mouth. Her father was old. The years of wrongful imprisonment had taken a toll that restored wealth couldn't fix. Elena was going through the final layers of Marcus's personal spending, the pocket change accounts that were too small for major laundering, but necessary for daily life. It was drudgery, until she found it. It was a recurring payment of $145,050 on the third Thursday of every month for the past 5 years. It went to a business called Bella's Botanicals, located in Flushing, Queens. It made no sense. Marcus hated flowers. He considered them a waste of money because they died. He only bought them for Elena when they were hosting an event where appearance mattered, and even then his assistant ordered massive, soulless arrangements from a high-end Madison Avenue florist. Why was the master of the universe spending pocket change at a tiny shop in Queens every month? It was a loose thread. Elena, the consummate case officer, couldn't ignore a loose thread. The next afternoon, she took the 7 train out to Queens. It felt strange to be on the subway, surrounded by regular people living lives untouched by high finance and corporate warfare. She got off at Main Street and walked a few blocks until the neighborhood became residential, rows of modest brick houses with small, well-tended gardens. Bella's Botanicals was tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. It was small, bursting with color, the smell of soil and damp petals spilling onto the sidewalk. Elena pushed the door open. A bell jingled. The shop was empty of customers. A woman was behind the counter, trimming thorns off roses. She looked up and smiled. The woman was perhaps 40 years old. She wasn't stunning in the way the women at Marcus's parties were. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied back in a practical messy bun, and she wore a soil-stained apron over jeans. But she had a warmth to her face, a natural, unguarded kindness in her eyes that was startling. "Hi there," the woman said. "Can I help you find something? We just got some beautiful hydrangeas in." Elena walked to the counter, pulling out her badge. "I'm Special Agent Elena Vance. Are you the owner? Isabella?" The woman's smile faltered, replaced by a look of confusion, not fear. "Yes, I'm Isabella. Is something wrong? Did I mess up my taxes?" "I'm not here about your taxes," Elena said, studying her face. "I'm here about a customer of yours, Marcus Thorne." Isabella dropped the rose she was holding. The color drained from her face. She didn't look like a co-conspirator caught in a lie. She looked devastated. "Mark?" she whispered. "You mean the news? The man on TV? They said he stole millions. I didn't believe it was the same person until I saw his picture." "You knew him as Mark?" Elena asked, her stomach tightening. "Yes, for about 5 years." Isabella wiped her hands on her apron, her movements shaky. "He used to come in here once a month. He'd buy the same thing. A small bouquet of yellow tulips, 104.45 cents, with the delivery fee to a nursing home upstate." "Who were the flowers for?" Elena asked. "His mother," Isabella said. Elena froze. "His mother died when he was 16. Isabella shook her head slowly. No, she didn't. She has severe dementia. She's been in a memory care facility near Poughkeepsie for 10 years. Marcus, he told me he pays for her care in cash so nobody knows she's alive. He said he was ashamed that he couldn't fix her." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet again. Marcus had lied about the foundational trauma of his life. His mother wasn't a tragic victim of poverty who died young. She was a living financial liability he kept hidden. "But he didn't just buy flowers," Isabella continued, her voice trembling. "He would stay, sometimes for hours. He'd sit on that stool right there and just talk. Not about business. He never mentioned money. He talked about books he read as a kid. He talked about how tired he was of pretending to be strong all the time." Isabella looked at Elena, her eyes filling with tears. "He was kind here, Agent Vance. He was quiet and sad and kind. Sometimes he'd help me water the plants in the back. He said the smell of the dirt reminded him of being a boy, before everything got complicated." Elena stared at this woman, this simple, kind gardener in Queens. Marcus hadn't been having a torrid affair. He hadn't been buying her diamonds. He had been coming here to play act at being a decent human being. He had been coming here to escape the monster he had created in Manhattan, and that hurt Elena more than any infidelity could have. "Did you love him?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Isabella looked down at her hands. "He never touched me. Not once, it wasn't like that. But yes, I loved the man who sat on that stool. I don't know the man on the news. But I know Mark hated himself." Elena walked out of the flower shop without another word. The sun seemed too bright outside. She had spent 7 years married to a performance. She thought the performance was all there was to Marcus Thorne. She thought he was pure ego and greed. Finding out that there was a sliver of humanity left in him, a sliver he shared with this stranger in Queens over cheap yellow tulips, a sliver he had starved and hidden away while building an empire on her father's grave, was the final agonizing twist of the knife. He was capable of being Mark. He just chose to be Marcus Thorne instead. The trial was a circus, lasting 3 weeks. The prosecution was flawless, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Grant, with Elena sitting second chair, laid out the case like a gruesome autopsy. They traced every dollar from Silas Vance's stolen company, through the Panama shells, into the bribes, and finally into the Vantage Dynamics acquisition. Marcus's defense was anemic. His high-priced lawyers couldn't argue with math. When the jury delivered the verdict, guilty on all 34 counts, Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall in his expensive suit, his face a mask of arrogant indifference. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 20. It was over. The Titan had fallen. 1 year later. Elena walked through the security checkpoints of the FCI Otisville Medium Security Federal Prison. The air here was different than the MCC. It felt permanent. It smelled of industrial wax and hopelessness. She sat in the visitation room. It was less chaotic than the jail. The men here were settled into their long winters. When Marcus walked in, Elena barely recognized him. Gone were the bespoke Italian suits. He wore an ill-fitting beige jumpsuit. His hair, once coiffed to perfection, was graying at the temples and cut short. But the biggest change was in his eyes. The predatory, shark-like gleam was gone, replaced by a dull, vacant stare. He looked 20 years older. He looked like his father. He sat down heavily on the other side of the thick glass partition. He picked up the phone. "You look well, Elena," he said. His voice was rusty. "I'm okay," she said. "Dad is doing better. He's retiring for real this time. He's turning Vantage into a foundation for inner-city housing." Marcus let out a dry chuckle. "Always the saint, old Silas. Glad I could fund his philanthropy." "You didn't fund it, Marcus. You just held on to it for a while." Silence stretched between them. The ambient noise of the prison, guards shouting, doors clanging, filled the void. "Why did you come?" Marcus asked finally. "You won. The victory lap was a year ago." "I came because I needed to close the last file," Elena said. She leaned closer to the glass. "I went to Queens, Marcus." Marcus went still. His eyes focused on hers, sudden panic flaring behind the dullness. "I went to Bella's Botanicals." Marcus gripped the phone receiver so tight his knuckles turned white. For the first time since the night of the party, his composure cracked completely. His mask disintegrated. "Eleanor, don't," he begged, his voice hoarse. "Please, don't touch that." "You lied about your mother," Eleanor said calmly. You kept her alive in Poughkeepsie, and you went to Isabella to play pretend, to pretend you weren't the man who destroyed my family. She has nothing to do with this, Marcus hissed, pressing his forehead against the glass. She doesn't know anything. She's innocent. I know, Elena said. That's why you liked her. She was the only clean thing in your life. The only place where you weren't Marcus Thorne, the corporate raider. You were just Mark, the sad boy who liked the smell of dirt. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes and spilled over, running down his unshaven cheeks. It was shocking to see. The man who had sneered at Arthur Sterling when he cried was now weeping openly in a room full of convicts. Did you tell her? Marcus whispered, terrified. Did you tell her who I really am? Elena shook her head. No, I didn't have to. She saw the news, but she didn't believe it. She still thinks Mark was the real you. Marcus closed his eyes, a sob escaping his throat. Please tell me you didn't hurt her. Please tell me you left her alone. I left her alone, Elena said. She's not part of the case. The payments were too small to matter. Marcus let out a shuddering breath of relief. He slumped against the partition, defeated not by the law, but by the exposure of his one secret vulnerability. Why didn't you use it against me at the trial? He asked. It would have proved what a sociopath I am. Living a double life. Because it was the only thing that proved you weren't entirely a sociopath, Elena said. She stood up. The visit was over. That's your real punishment, Marcus, Elena said, looking down at the broken man on the other side of the glass. It's not the prison. It's not the loss of the money. It's knowing that you were capable of being the man Isabella loved. You could have been Mark. You could have had a simple, decent life. But you chose the penthouse instead. You chose to be my enemy instead of her friend. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes hollow. And now, Eleanor said, turning toward the exit, you have nothing, and you have to live with Mark in that cell for the next 25 years, knowing you killed him for money. She walked out of the prison into the crisp autumn air of upstate New York. She took a deep breath. The air didn't taste like victory. It didn't taste like revenge. It just tasted clean. It was finally over. Inside, Marcus Thorne put the phone back on the receiver. He looked around at the cinder block walls of his cage. He closed his eyes and tried to remember the smell of potting soil and yellow tulips, but all he could smell was bleach and regret. The silence in the room was deafening. What an incredible, twisting journey. Marcus Thorne thought he was playing a game of chess where money was the only object. He thought he could build a skyscraper on a foundation of lies, and that his wealth would insulate him from gravity. But he forgot that the most dangerous variables in life aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They are the people we underestimate. He underestimated Arthur Sterling's love for his brother. He underestimated Silas Vance's resilience. And most fatally, he underestimated his own wife, Eleanor, seeing her only as an accessory when she was actually the architect of his downfall. Marcus's story is a brutal reminder that you can win every battle in the boardroom. You can buy every luxury the world has to offer. But if your legacy is built on destroying others, the check will eventually come due. And sometimes the person holding that bill is the one standing right next to you when you raise your glass to celebrate too early. Whatever you do, don't build your castle on someone else's grave. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of power, betrayal, and corporate revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who loves a good twist ending. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our next real-life drama. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story.